On June 10, 2026, the IAEA Board of Governors voted on a resolution. 21 countries voted in favor. 3 voted against: Russia, China, and Niger. 10 abstained. The resolution said one thing: Iran must tell us where its uranium is and let our inspectors in to verify it. Right now, immediately. This is overdue. The resolution passed. Iran has not responded. The uranium has not been accounted for. The inspectors have not gone in. And 4 days later, on June 14, the United States and Iran signed a memorandum of understanding to end a war and begin 60 days of nuclear negotiations. I want you to sit with that sequence of events for a moment. On June 10th, the world's nuclear verification body formally declared that it cannot find Iran's 440 kilograms of bomb-ready uranium. On June 14th, America signed a deal to negotiate the future of that uranium in a 60-day window. And the minimum commitment under that MOU, per Investing Lives analysis of the agreement text published June 15th, I read that the uranium be diluted on-site under IAEA supervision. On-site under IAEA supervision by an agency that has had zero access to any Iranian nuclear facility for 97 consecutive days as of the signing date. By an agency whose Director General told Foreign Policy in April that the uranium is likely still at Isfahan, inside an underground tunnel complex that was targeted in strikes. By an agency that has been informed by its own sources that, as Al Jazeera reported in February 2026, even the Iranians aren't able to get into those facilities. Today, I want to spend the next 20 minutes showing you the precise structural flaw at the center of the most important nuclear agreement of the last decade. Not a political flaw, not a diplomatic flaw, a physical one. A verification architecture that requires an agency to supervise material that nobody, not the IAEA, not the United States, and possibly not even Iran, can currently confirm exists in an accessible location. If the uranium cannot be physically accessed, the entire 60-day negotiation is built on a foundation that cannot support what is being built on it. This is not analysis, this is geometry. Okay, let's go. The framework I need to introduce today, I call the verification gap problem. And here is the core idea. Every nuclear agreement in history has depended on one assumption so fundamental that it is almost never stated explicitly: that the material being negotiated over is physically accessible to the parties negotiating it. You cannot agree to dilute uranium you cannot reach. You cannot agree to transfer uranium you cannot locate. You cannot agree to IAEA supervision of uranium whose current condition and whereabouts are unknown to the IAEA, the United States, and critically, possibly to Iran itself. The verification gap problem is not about political will. Iran can have perfect political will to comply with every uranium commitment in the MOU and still be physically unable to fulfill it if the material is buried under collapsed structures in an underground tunnel complex that no one has entered since June 2025. And that is precisely what the evidence suggests may be the case. Now let me give you the granular data, because theory without data is just storytelling. Source number 1, the Institute for Science and International Security, ISIS, Washington, D.C., one of the most respected independent nuclear analysis organizations in the world. Their June 2026 analysis of the IAEA verification report is the single most important document for understanding the verification gap problem. Their exact finding: the IAEA stopped conducting verification activities in Iran in accordance with the NPT Safeguards Agreement after February 28, 2026. And then they made a finding that almost no mainstream outlet has picked up at the level of significance it deserves. They wrote that the IAEA report provides much less detail on the location of enriched uranium than Director General Rafael Grossi has reported in media interviews, and no information on the other candidate sites where the material may be entombed. The word entombed is not metaphorical. It means physically buried. The ISIS analysis lists the candidate entombment sites. Fordo, the underground enrichment facility built into a mountain near Qom specifically to resist airstrikes. A tunnel site built in 2007 at Natanz. Pickaxe Mountain near Natanz. None of these sites have been accessed by IAEA inspectors since early 2025. The ISIS analysis further confirms that the IAEA was required under standard safeguards to verify HEU stockpiles every 30 days. The last verification was February 27th, 2026, as of the June 14th MOU signing. That represents approximately 107 days without a single HEU verification. More foreign? Three complete verification cycles missed. Think about what that means. The uranium being negotiated in the 60-day talks has not been physically confirmed to exist in any specific accessible location for more than 3 months. Does that make sense? Source number 2, IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi, speaking to Foreign Policy magazine in late April 2026. His statement, much of Iran's enriched uranium is likely still at Isfahan. The word likely from a nuclear verification official is not reassurance. It is a formal admission of uncertainty. When the head of the UN nuclear watchdog says likely still in response to a question about material that his agency is mandated to verify monthly, he is telling you that the agency does not know. And then Grossi told the IAEA Board of Governors, documented by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists and ISIS simultaneously, that the June 8 satellite analysis had identified 18 blue transport casks on flatbed trucks entering the Isfahan underground tunnel on June 9, 2025, 3 days before the Israeli 12-day war began. 3 days. Iran moved the casks before the strikes. The strikes then hit the above-ground portions of Isfahan. Damage was confirmed to the chemical laboratory, the uranium conversion plant, the Tehran reactor fuel manufacturing plant. But the underground tunnel complex received a loss of power event, not confirmed structural destruction. What is inside that tunnel, whether those 18 casks can be physically accessed, whether the tunnel is safe to enter, Fani's. None of this has been verified by any parties. Source number 3, Al Jazeera correspondent Ali Hashem, reporting from the Vienna IAEA discussions in February 2026. His exact sourced observation, which I want you to read very carefully. The IAEA is aware that even the Iranians aren't able to get into those facilities. Even the Iranians. This is not about the IAEA being blocked by Iranian policy. This is a physical access problem. The same strikes that were supposed to destroy Iran's enrichment capacity may have created conditions in which the enrichment material, specifically the 440.9 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, is physically trapped in underground structures that no one can safely enter. If that is accurate, the core commitment of the MOU, uranium dilution under IAEA supervision, requires a physical engineering problem to be solved before any diplomatic agreement can be implemented. That engineering problem is not mentioned anywhere in the publicly described MOU framework. Not once. Source number 4, Western officials speaking to Bloomberg, June 3rd, 2026. Their exact statement, the risk that Iran is covertly pursuing nuclear weapons is higher today than before the US and Israel launched their first strikes. Read that sentence one more time. The military campaign that was supposed to eliminate Iran's nuclear threat has, according to Western officials themselves, increased the proliferation risk. Why? Because before the strikes, the uranium was at known declared facilities under periodic IAEA verification. After the strikes, the uranium is at unknown or inaccessible locations with zero IAEA verification for over 100 days. There's also a second dimension to Bloomberg's finding. CSIS satellite analysts documented what they described as possible signs of renewed nuclear activity at Iranian sites in their March 2026 assessment. This language in nuclear policy terms is extremely significant. If Iran has renewed nuclear activity, even at reduced capacity using undamaged equipment, during the 97-day verification blackout, no one currently knows it. The IAEA cannot confirm it. The US U.S. intelligence community is using the word possible. And the MOU being signed on Friday does not include a mechanism for resolving that uncertainty before the 60-day nuclear talks begin. Source number 5, the IAEA Board of Governors Resolution, June 10, 2026, adopted with 21 votes in favor and 3 against. The vote itself tells you everything. Russia and China voted against a resolution demanding Iran let inspectors in to verify where the uranium is. Iran mission to Vienna responded to the resolution on social media, describing the IAEA as instrumentalized by warmongers. Now cross-reference that response with the MOU commitment, which lists dilution under IAEA supervision as the minimum nuclear obligation. The IAEA cannot supervise material it cannot access. Iran just described the IAEA as a political weapon. The 3 countries that vetoed the access resolution, Russia and China, are the same 2 countries that have been Iran's primary diplomatic protectors throughout the war. The resolution passed. It has no enforcement mechanism. Iran has not complied. The June 14th MOU does not reference the June 10th board resolution or its demands. The 2 documents are in direct tension with each other, and nobody in the diplomatic community appears to be reconciling them. Now, I want to add a dimension that I have not seen any major analysis outlet address at the level it deserves. The verification gap problem has a deeply specific historical precedent that explains exactly how the current situation could produce an outcome that the MOU's framers are not prepared for. In 1994, the United States and North Korea signed the agreed framework. North Korea committed to freezing its nuclear program and eventually dismantling its plutonium production facilities. The IAEA was supposed to verify compliance, but there was a verification gap built into the framework. North Korea did not have to allow comprehensive IAEA inspection of its suspected weapons program until after significant economic concessions had already been delivered. North Korea used the period between the framework signing and full IAEA access to continue, covertly developing a uranium enrichment program that the agreed framework did not cover at all. When the covert program was discovered in 2002, North Korea withdrew from the NPT entirely. They had used the diplomatic window to preserve and advance their weapons capability. The agreed framework produced 8 years of apparent stability and then a North Korean nuclear test. I am not saying Iran will follow that exact path. What I am saying is that the verification gap problem is not a theoretical concern. It has a documented historical consequence, and the specific structural feature that made the agreed framework fail, a verification commitment that began after concessions rather than before, is present in the MOU right now. Sanctions relief begins flowing when the Strait opens, which is scheduled for 30 days after the June 19th signing. IAEA access to verify the uranium begins when Iran allows it, which requires a political decision Iran has not made in 107 days. Now, I want to be completely honest and fair. Here is the strongest possible argument against the concern I'm describing. The Steelman is this: the verification gap problem overstates the physical access issue. Grossi himself said likely still at Isfahan, meaning the IAEA's working assumption based on satellite imagery and prior tracking of nuclear material movements is that the uranium is in a known location. The 18 blue casts photographed entering the Isfahan tunnel on June 9th, 2025 provide a physical trail. The underground complex at Isfahan was not confirmed destroyed. Power was disrupted, not the structure. Iran has an incentive to restore IAEA access quickly because the phased sanctions relief in the MOU is conditioned on progress in nuclear talks, and no progress can be verified without inspector access. Iran, therefore, has a financial incentive to let inspectors in faster than the skeptics predict. Furthermore, Iran is a signatory to the NPT. Its legal obligations to the IAEA have not changed. The June 10th board resolution formalizes existing legal requirements. Iran has previously restored access after disputes, including the September 2025 Cairo agreement with Grossi. It can do so again. That is a serious argument. The sanctions incentive structure is real. But here is what the Steelman cannot explain. It cannot explain the Arakchi pattern documented by Iran International. In September 2025, Arakchi signed an access agreement with Grossi in Cairo. Within 24 hours, he publicly walked it back, saying it was only a one-time visit to Bushehr power plant. Iran International documented this as Iran's familiar pattern, apparent concessions abroad, followed by dismissive clarifications at home. If that pattern holds in the 60-day nuclear window, the first access agreement will produce one supervised inspection and then a domestic clarification that it set no precedent. The Steelman assumes Iran's financial incentive will overcome that pattern. The pattern predates the financial incentive, and it cannot explain the CSIS possible signs of renewed nuclear activity finding. If Iran has been operating any enrichment capacity during the 107-day blackout, the 440.9 kilograms figure from February 27th is no longer the correct number. The actual current stockpile, whatever it is, has not been verified. You cannot negotiate the dilution of a stockpile whose current size is unknown. The Steelman assumes the February 27th number is still accurate. No one has confirmed this. And the Western officials who spoke to Bloomberg on June 3rd told you explicitly that the proliferation risk is higher now than before the strikes. That is not a statement consistent with confidence in the February baseline. I want to know what you think, whether the IAEA can realistically gain access to the uranium before the 60-day window expires. Leave your analysis in the comments. Here are 3 specific things to watch. Watch for any IAEA statements specifically referencing physical access restoration within the first 2 weeks of the MOU entering force on Friday. The minimum nuclear commitment in the MOU is uranium dilution under IAEA supervision. For that commitment to be actionable, the IAEA needs physical site access before the 60-day window is half over. If 2 weeks pass after the June 19th signing with no confirmed IAEA site visit, not a Bushehr courtesy visit, an actual access to the HEU storage locations, the MOU's nuclear track is already structurally behind schedule. Grossi's language in any post-signing statement will tell you whether the agency believes access is imminent or is preparing for another extended negotiation over access conditions. Watch for any engineering assessment of the Isfahan underground tunnel's current structural integrity. The uranium went in. The surface facilities were struck. The tunnel received a power disruption event. Whether the tunnel can be safely entered is a physical engineering question, not a political one. If any Western government, IAEA member state, or independent nuclear monitoring organization publishes a technical assessment of Isfahan tunnel access conditions in the next 30 days, it will be the most important document in the nuclear track. Watch specifically for satellite imagery analysis updates from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, CSIS, or ISIS-online. The 3 organizations that have been tracking Isfahan satellite data most rigorously. Watch the NPT review conference implications. The 5th NPT review conference failed to reach consensus on May 22, 2026, the 3rd consecutive failure. This matters for the MOU because the broader non-proliferation architecture that gives any Iran nuclear deal its legal context is weakened every time the review conference fails. Iran's negotiating team knows this. In the 60-day window, Iran will negotiate against a backdrop in which the international consensus on nuclear verification norms is itself contested. If Iran challenges the IAEA's authority to supervise the dilution, citing the June 10th board vote as evidence of political bias, and the failed NPT review conference as evidence of institutional breakdown, it will have a more powerful legal argument than it would have had if the non-proliferation architecture were intact. Watch for any Iranian legal challenge to IAEA authority specifically framed around the June 10th vote outcome. And your homework. I want you to find 2 documents and read them in sequence. First, find ISIS-Online's June 2026 analysis of the IAEA verification report, the one that identifies Fordow, the Natanz tunnel site, and Kornel, Shinisan Soms, Fons and Pickaxe Mountain, as candidate stockpile locations and uses the word entombed. And Liu Chiaoneki Bentamso. Then find the Investing Live summary of MOU nuclear terms published June 15, 2026. Then in Poirlin Tatso, the one that lists dilution on site under IAEA supervision as the minimum commitment. Put those 2 documents side by side. The first tells you where the uranium may physically be. The second tells you what Iran has committed to doing with it. Ask yourself one question. Can the second document be implemented given the physical situation described in the first? Because the answer to that question is the only honest answer to whether the 60-day nuclear window produces an agreement or produces the third failed Iran nuclear framework of the last decade. I am not asking you to agree with me. I am asking you to look at the same data and ask different questions. Every network is asking whether Iran will agree to nuclear limits. The question you should be asking is whether any agreed nuclear limit can be verified, given that the verification agency cannot currently locate the material with certainty, cannot access the most likely storage site, and has been operating in a monitoring blackout for more than 100 days. An agreement that cannot be verified is not an agreement. It is a document. The difference between those 2 things is exactly what the next 60 days will determine.